Well, hello, God's beautifully blessed people. Welcome back to Word of God First Forever. Glad to have you here again today. And I know you're looking for a word from the Lord. When you stop by this channel, you want to hear a word from the Lord. And I hope I have something good for you today, because it's really been fascinating me. So let me start sharing right now. Okay, so the last time we talked, I was in the book of First Kings, and we had already gone through the life of David that was coming to an end, and he had his conversation with his son Solomon, because Solomon was going to be the next one to sit on the throne. And so he let Solomon know that he had to continue to stay focused on God, do the things that are pleasing to God, and to, just be a blessing, to not only to have the privilege to sit on the throne, but to be able to serve, be a servant to the people. Because David was a good king, and he was a faithful king. He was faithful to God and to the covenant they had together. So he wanted his son Solomon to follow and do the same thing, because God was faithful and holding up his end of the covenant, of course, because the stipulation is, when you're in a covenant, you have to do your part, and God will definitely do his. But you have to be committed and devoted to following God's laws, to sticking to the covenant, to be true to the covenant. Because once you stray away from the covenant and you're not complying and doing the things that are pleasing in God's sight, then God will pull back. He will pull back and will not continue to move forward with you, because you're not being faithful. Because he blesses you because it blesses him when you are obedient. I guess that's the best way to put it. As long as you're obedient and you are honoring him, and the covenant means something to you, then everything will work out fine. But we find that once David passed on and Solomon came into his kingship and on the throne, that things went well, because he was really focused on being a good king to the people. So he did ask for wisdom, which he's known for that, Solomon being a very wise king. And he did really well. He was the one that was actually chosen by God to build the temple, because I believe in the last video I said that God actually chose him to be king. But I misspoke, because as I kept reading, I saw that David actually wanted Solomon to be king, and God was in agreement with that. But David also wanted to build the temple, and that's what God said no. He didn't want David to build the temple, because David was a warrior and had too much blood on his hands. So God said that he would have his son to build the temple. So that's what God actually did. God, he agreed with David with his choice of Solomon. So he didn't actually appoint, Solomon himself. He just wanted Solomon to handle the building of the temple. So Solomon did great. He got the temple built. He asked God for wisdom so he can help the people, and he got that. And so he was really reigning, and the people appreciated him. And people were coming from miles around to hear him, to hear him speak and to share his wisdom, to help them out. So that worked out really well. After the temple was built and it was dedicated, he had everyone to come, for the dedication of the temple. And he made prayers, during this ceremonial time. And he asked God for blessings and mercies over the people, to have forgiveness if they fall or something should happen and they kind of get out of line, that God would forgive them and bring them back into the fold. He made a very extensive prayer, very appropriate. And the people had a blessed time there for the dedication of the temple. And they also placed the Ark of the Covenant in the temple. So after that, then God did come to Solomon again, because, he came to Solomon once before when Solomon asked for wisdom to be, a good king. And so he came to Solomon again after Solomon blessed the temple and asked for blessings for the people. And he reminded Solomon, if you follow my laws and do as I have asked you to do and stay committed to the covenant we have, then anything you put your hand to or anyone who sits on that throne will succeed. And normally, it would go down to the next descendant, each descendant that you have that's in line for the throne is usually, passed down to the men in the family, So God had to go over that again with him to make sure that he understood that was the agreement when it comes to the covenant and having a successful reign on the throne. And let me find that. I'm going to read that. I'm going to read all of those because all of this is very important. Okay, so this is 1 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. And it came to pass when Solomon had finished the building of the house of the Lord and the king's house and all Solomon's desire, which he was pleased to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon the second time, as he had appeared unto him at Gibeon. And the Lord said unto him, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication, that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built, to put my name there forever. And mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and wilt keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then will I cut off Israel out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name will I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. And at this house, which is high, every one that passeth by it shall be astonished and shall hiss. And they shall say, why hath the Lord done thus unto this land and to this house? And they shall answer, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods, and have worshipped them, and served them. Therefore hath the Lord brought upon them all this evil. So that was verses 1 through 9. This was after the temple was dedicated, and God came to Solomon to have this conversation, with him. All right. So then we moved on to chapter 11. All right. Chapter 11, it started out with saying, but King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. And Solomon clave unto these in love. So the very thing that God asked him not to do, at this point, he completely started doing the opposite. And that did kind of throw me a little bit, but it just made me wonder, when you have more than enough, because Solomon had more than enough. All he needed, God provided. God provided. And so it was nothing that he was lacking, because he was in a covenant and he was honoring the covenant, and he was moving like a well-oiled machine. And then all of a sudden, one of the things that God had told him was forbidden for him to do, then he did it. And I said, well, why? Why risk losing everything when all of the things that you wanted to have, you have? So I thought about that. I said, okay, so he loved many strange women. And the New King James Version says that he loved, but King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh. So foreign women, these are women that God told them to stay away from. And it seemed like because that commandment was there to stay away from them, it made him want them more, I guess. So I think he was slipping. Actually, I think what it is, when Satan sees things going well and moving in a positive way, especially when it's up, building up the kingdom of God, then he has to start trying to figure out how he can stop that. So he usually doesn't have any new tricks, so he'll go back to his bag of old tricks to see what he can use. And he knew that one of the weaknesses of David, his father, was women. He knew that he had a weakness there. And I would assume it's maybe I'm going to say the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh. And so that was what he used against Solomon. So, and it was true, because God had warned Solomon, don't be involved with these strange women. And he warned him that they would turn his heart away from him, that he would no longer have a heart for God, but he would be focusing on these women. And it was true, because they did worship other gods, and Solomon loving them. And then I guess he wanted to please them. So he started, allowing them to worship this other God, and he was even providing them with altars to make sacrifices. And it just really just went completely bonkers. He really ran off the rails with that. And it was so hurtful to read, because you can almost feel how disappointed and how hurt God felt, and how betrayed he felt for him not holding up his end of the covenant, and for a fleshly reason. After he has been sustaining him throughout all of his his time on the throne and all of his endeavors, he did. I was really just thinking about it, because whenever I read something, I always think back about myself, and you try to think about how you actually are looking at God's goodness and his mercy. Are we cherishing it? Is it of value to us? Is it making his heart happy? Or is it breaking his heart? Is it pleasing in his sight? Or does it make him feel like he's not important, unless you just need him to do something for you? But when it's time to reciprocate and do what he has asked you to do in obedience, and you do the complete total opposite. So God had already talked to him, and he had come to him not that long ago, and told him what the stipulations were to keep his blessings coming, to keep it flowing. Verse 4 through 13 of chapter 11. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then Solomon built an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrifice unto their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit, I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. So God, even though Solomon turned his back on him, he still honored the covenant that he had with Solomon's father, David. So he let Solomon know that the kingdom is going to be taken away, but I'll do it to your son, not to you. I'll make you, to be able to follow out your term on the throne, but it will be taken from your son. And in the meantime, since Solomon you know, had so much time on his hands, I guess, to fall in love with some women that worship false gods, he stirred up a little trouble. He stirred up some things to, you know, to let Solomon know that if you don't want smooth sailing, you don't have to have smooth sailing. You do have free choice. And verse 14 of chapter 11 says, "And the Lord stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed in Edom. For it came to pass, when David was in Edom, and Joab the captain of the host was gone up to bury the slain after he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months did Joab remain there with all Israel, until he had cut off every male in Edom." So this was during the time when David was, you know, king, and they had conquered this land that they're speaking of. And Hadad actually was a child during that time, but they all had to flee, and they ended up fleeing to Egypt. So Hadad was just a child during that time, but David was on the throne for 40 years. And Solomon, he was on the throne now for, I'm going to think maybe about, I'm going to think at least 15 years or so, 17 years maybe. So this lad had a chance to grow up. So Hadad is one of the ones that God stirred up. Okay, then I kept reading down, and it came to verse 23 of chapter 11, and it said, "And God stirred him up another adversary, and this one's name is Rezon, the son of Eliada, which fled from his lord Hadadezer, king of Zobah." And Zobah was another land that they had conquered, that David had conquered during his reign. All right, this is verse 24 of 1 Kings chapter 11. "And he gathered men unto him and became captain over a band when David slew them of Zobah. And they went to Damascus and dwelt therein and reigned in Damascus. And he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, beside the mischief that Hadad did. And he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria." So he was really somebody that you know, gave Solomon quite a bit of a fit there. But he had it just perfectly fine at first. You know, everything was going fine, everything was going smooth. And when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, and that Joab, the captain of the host, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, that I may go to mine own country." So it's like, you know, when he heard, now Solomon had been on the throne for quite a bit. So this was like news to him that David had passed, that David, you know, slept with his fathers. So that was quite a bit of time. So that just goes to show you that when God offers you protection, you have full protection. He didn't want anybody to get in the way of what Solomon was trying to do. And if you got in Solomon's way, then you're getting in God's way. So he made them oblivious to what was really going on. And that kept them away. That kept them away, because when I looked at the different territories that were conquered by David, it wasn't like they were like really, really far away. And words of kings and things like that passing, that usually gets around. Not saying it was, you know, they had telephone, but it still got around. I mean, he did have a visit. Solomon had a visit from Queen of Sheba, and she came all the way from over Ethiopia. And that was a long trek for her because they traveled by camel. So if she can hear about what's going on, then I would think that they would have heard about it. But if God didn't want them to, then they were not going to hear about it. They were not going to hear about it. So that just lets you know, when you turn your back on the Lord and he's providing things for you, it's more than you imagine. But when you have more than enough, you get a little comfortable and you don't realize when you're turning your back on the Lord, you're turning your back on a lot. And it's not going to be missed until you don't have it. As long as it's flowing and everything is good, everything's going the way you want it to go, okay, that's fine. But as soon as you need that protection that God is giving you, especially through a covenant, and you don't honor it and it's taken from you, you feel that. You will feel that. So, it just made me wonder, why would such a wise man make such a reckless decision? And that's the only thing I could think of. Satan just used that one thing about women, the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh. And probably the pride of life had something to do with that too, because he was used to everything going for him, in such a positive direction that he just got comfortable. He just got comfortable and he felt like, it's going to be okay. The Lord going to probably give me a pass on that. But he had already talked to him. God had already talked to him and told him what the requirements were. So that's why I feel like it was such a reckless decision to make. Okay, and so once you're comfortable having the best of the best, you feel like, it's just another day in the neighborhood. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I feel like I'm big and bad enough to do, and what I see I want, I'm going to take it. It's mine. But when you take your eyes off of God, then Satan takes the floor so he can show you what little deceitful things he has in his bag of tricks that he can, tempt you into wanting. And that's exactly what happened. So he went after, the gods of these foreign women and even built altars and everything, And so God actually removed his protection of peace. He removed it. So of the three adversaries that God stirred up, Jeroboam was the son of Solomon's servant Nebat and was made ruler over the tribe of Joseph as a mighty man of valor. Solomon felt he was a very capable and industrious man until he heard that Jeroboam would be receiving those tribes. Then he sought to delete them. So Jeroboam fled to Egypt until Solomon's death. Because Jeroboam, he was a good warrior. He was a good organizer. And so Solomon, looking at him as a servant, because his mother was a servant for Solomon. And Jeroboam, he was very skilled at what he did. All right, 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 28. All right. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious. He made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. Okay, the house of Joseph. He gave him rule over that. So, God, he continued to honor David because David was faithful. And David was repentant when David did something that he knew wasn't pleasing to God. He didn't have a problem with asking God's forgiveness and repenting from that sin. So that covenant stayed very tight and true, even after David had passed away. So I looked at the fact that when Solomon came to the end of his days and he passed away, I noticed that there wasn't any counsel from Solomon. You know how before David passed, he had a conversation with Solomon, telling him how he should reign on the throne and the relationship that he should keep very close with God, following his commandments and all that. He had that conversation with Solomon before Solomon actually became king. But now that Solomon has passed, it goes right into Rehoboam. His son was the next king to the throne. And I said, wow, they skipped over the part of Solomon having a conversation with his son. So I looked that up. I said, well, where is the conversation, with his son? And there isn't any recordings of a conversation of Solomon with his son Rehoboam. So I said, ooh, that's a big disconnect. That's a big disconnect. It's a very cold and dark place to have to move and disregarding God. You need to make some moves, and you want to have some assurance that if you stumble or fall, or if you need help, you have someone that you can call on, and you have someone that is going to answer when you call. And it wasn't even discussed. It wasn't even discussed. And so that's a big disconnect and a red flag right there. So when you stop saying his name, and when you no longer, seek his face, you don't listen to his voice, that is a very, very cold and lonely place to be. And what usually happens when you have all of this loneliness, disconnection, not communicating with your Creator? Who gets busy? The adversary, Satan. He gets busy. So after Rehoboam got in the seat, after he became king, and the tribes were split, 10 went to Israel, and that was Jeroboam, because Jeroboam was supposed to take 10 tribes. And so 10 tribes went to Israel, and the tribe that was left for Rehoboam was Judah, the tribe of Judah. And that was the only one that Rehoboam had. And Jeroboam had the 10. And I think from that point on, everything was just so up in the air, and it just went completely off the charts. It was not a good thing. I don't think anything positive actually ever happened uh, for the 10 tribes of Israel. It was just, they went off into more idolatry and false god worship. It was just bad because a lot of the women were, you know, worshiping other gods, and they were building different altars. Because for one thing, Jeroboam didn't want the people to have to be coming down to Jerusalem to worship, because he felt like if they come down there, you know, they might get a little nostalgic and want to, you know, just go back to the house of David and start, you know, wanting to be with Rehoboam. So he started building little altars and things a little closer to where he was on the northern end, to keep people from coming down to Jerusalem to try to, you know, worship in the temple. So it was just a big mess. And it's a lot of things that happened in that chapter during those reigns with those two. But I know one thing that they never had, and that was peace. They were always at each other, you know. So once they turned their backs on God, then it was just total chaos. So I pulled from that Kings. I pulled from the book of Kings because I really want to know about Kings, because it seems like I keep hearing it all the time, you know, about kings and kingdoms and just different things like that, you know, reigning, trying to get you know, everything to follow behind somebody. But you know, you got to really be careful of who you follow behind or who you sit under. Now, if it's a God-fearing person, a God-fearing leader, you know, then usually what is blessed at the top will trickle down to the people below. It's a trickle down effect, you know. If you have a good leader, then blessings going to come down on them, and then it'll just move right on down to the people. But if you don't want that trickle down. You're going to want to opt out of that, because that's bad. That's not something that you're going to run after if you don't have a good leader. So that's why it's so important to have a relationship with God yourself, so you can talk to him, and he will let you know when it's time to make a move, you know. And so that was one of the things that I did get from that it's important to be obedient, to honor covenants, to give God all of the honor and glory that he deserves to get, and respect a covenant, especially with the Most High God. Respect that. Because if you don't, it's not going to bring anything to you that you're going to want at all. So, I mean, they say it wasn't really anything good that happened for the 10 tribes of Israel. It was just always seemed like more wickedness, more idol worship, just more apostasy. It wasn't good. But Judah did getting themselves together. They started having some good kings. And I did write down a few of the names because I wanted to know who were the good kings. At that point, I need to hear something positive because it sounded like it was just so bad. Okay, so Judah's good kings. Okay, one was Asa, who worked on maintaining his faith and getting rid of idols and high places of worship. Jehoshaphat, he backed the efforts of Asa's reforms and had the priest to go out to teach the law. Okay, so he backed Asa's plans and worked with promoting and pushing his plans forward, and to send out priests to teach the law. Then there was Jehoash. He began the efforts to repair the temple in Jerusalem, because at one point they were overtaken and so many things were destroyed. The temple was destroyed. So I think he took the effort to try to, to repair it. The temple in Jerusalem. That was Jehoash. Jehoash. Then there was Amaziah or Amaziah. And he followed the ways of God, but stumbled here and there. Don't we all? We stumble here and there. There wasn't much else written about him other than he followed the ways of God, but that's a good thing. So that was good. Then we have Azariah or Uzziah. I guess that was two different ways of saying his name, Azariah or Uzziah. And he was a strong king with some wins in war, but he had to be punished for pride. He had a little problem with pride. So other than that, I'm sure that's something that God can work with. All he has to do is just, let you experience a couple of things, a few things, and kind of have you to start embracing your humility. All right, then we have Jotham or Jotham. He did what was right and pleasing in God's sight. Hezekiah, he had a strong faith in God and was excellent at destroying idols and high places. So I know Hezekiah was busy, because there was a lot of that going on. And then the last one here is Josiah. Josiah was passionate about rediscovering the book of the law and renewing focus of honoring God's covenant. So that was beautiful. I like to see that. To see that they were getting things back in order the way it should be. Because Jesus was a descendant from that house of Judah. So they got to work on that. And it's so much more to that chapter that can be read. It's very interesting, very enlightening. But I tell you, it really makes you just think about how important relationship with God is, how important and how beneficial. It's also beneficial because you're in a covenant with someone, the Spirit of the Most High God that will not lie to you. He doesn't try to deceive you. He loves you. He only wants the best for you. And you can depend on him. And all he asks is that he can depend on us to keep our hearts in the right place, to continue to love, honor, and worship Him and Him only. No one else gets the glory of the Lord. It belongs to Him. So if He can get that type of follower, that type of love from His people, then you will have more than enough. More than enough, including free will to accept the gift. But you know, it is really amazing how you can be offered something that is so completely wonderful. And some people still don't want it. But free choice is what we have. But I ask God for wisdom to make sure that I make the right choices and cling to those choices, especially when the choice is Him, to do His will, to stay in His graces, and to love Him, truly love Him, to the point where it would break your heart to break His heart. You know, you got to feel that. You got to feel like, I know God would be so disappointed. I know He would be so disappointed if I did this, because, you know, you just got to think things through sometimes, because it's easy to move on a feeling or a notion, or to get, you know, puffed up in your feelings and your, you know, pride, you know, saying what you're not going to put up with, what you're not going to take and everything. And then you look at all of the blessings that God places on us, how faithful He is to us. And we can sit down and think, you know, when has He not come to my rescue when I needed anything, whatever it may be? And how many times He's probably come to my rescue before I even before I even knew I needed rescuing. So he can rescue us from having to know we're going down almost for the third time, but He stepped in. You know, so that's what I wanted to share. I don't want to talk too long, because I know the last time I think it was almost an hour long. I was like, what in the world? But it's so easy to get. It's so easy to get into the thought processes and just looking at the Word of God and learning so much. And, you know, it's so easy to do. But I'm working on it, gang. I am working on it. I am trying to learn how to do my timing so that I won't keep you too long. But thank you for hanging in there with me today. And I hope you got some type of a positive message out of that. And I would advise that you read through Kings and look at some of the things that was going on. And just consider the goodness of the Lord. And let's just think about it. We can think about it personally, and we can think about it on the broad. I mean, just looking at the stories in the Bible about things that went on before us, and just, you know, it just helps you to appreciate the love of God more. So thank you for stopping by again, saints, to see what's going on over here at Word of God First Forever. I appreciate your time, and I hope to see you again. So you have a blessed day. And remember, God loves you. And He always provides for the people He loves and for the people that love Him. He always provides more than enough. Be blessed.